Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context, and today we are talking about the update to Deadpool X-Force. And I do think this really does fix a lot of the problems because there was some fun stuff in there. The taunts in this kit were already very powerful, but now there's that very nice juicy payoff of damage. We all love damage. You're going to enjoy this kit. So getting right into the attributes, survivability of 2, those taunts are nice. This kit plays really well with inequity. If you can stack up those taunts, you're not going to take nearly as much damage from your opponent. But there's not really anything else keeping you alive. So I think 2 is probably fair. Damage of 5 is absolutely accurate. 3 bars of power with this kit kills so many things. Now, there are ways to slow it down. This kit is vulnerable to inequity or to weaknesses. Anything capping burst damage, like Serpent or Sentinel, if you've watched that Spotlight, will cause problems here. But there's not a whole lot of those things. And so for the most part, this is just 3 bars kills. And that's very good. Ease of use 3. You can still do fancy stuff with this kit, but for the most part, building 3 bars of power and throwing special 2, special 1 after a light combo ender is what you need. So honestly, 3 for ease of use might be a little low. Utility of 2, there's not a whole lot going on here other than the damage. This is mostly taunt, like we talked about. That's a kind of utility, but there's not a huge amount going on there. And then defender strength of 2. The special 2 is annoying. Taunts are annoying because, like I said, it slows things down, but otherwise there's not much going on here. So, strengths and weaknesses. Like we just said, burst damage. There's a ton of instant burst damage that is borderline uninteractable in this kit. We'll talk about why as we go. Most of it is this next part, Spleed to boofs. It's silly. We all know it's silly. That's the point, right? The point is that it gets around immunities and all that kind of stuff. And it's direct damage. Doesn't care about resistance, just goes burr. It also specifically punishes Purified champions and is really good against Nick Fury. In part because of this next bullet, which is that there is regen rate reduction against skill in here, which means that Nick can't even try to heal. And then weaknesses, I will say this first one actually isn't correct because cowardice is a reduction of hit damage. In specials, it's not an attack rating reduction, and so it won't do anything to Deadpool's cash out. Because you're not caring about the damage your hits are doing, you're caring about the damage your bursts are doing, and cowardice does not reduce that. So that won't do that, but weakness will. Right? And anything that resists burst damage, anything that puts debuffs on him in a PvP setting and thus exposes him to inequity, those do cause problems. Additionally, the kit is pretty tuned around you doing that special 2, special 1 cash out. And so if your opponent has some ability that disrupts your ability to go right from one into the next, then you might actually lose the effect from the special 2 that makes the special 1 so good, and then you might have some problems. So getting into those abilities, we referenced the taunts earlier. Here they are. They reduce the opponent's attack rating by 25% for 16 seconds. They stack up to 3. It's important to note that taunts, like other weaknesses, are multiplicative with each other. They are not additive. And so having these 3 taunts up does not reduce the opponent's attack rating by 75%. Instead, if you want an accurate read here, instead you're going to take 0.75 and raise that to the 3rd power, and that is how much attack rating the opponent has left relative to being at full strength. So if I do that real quick, you're looking at those 3 25% taunts are leaving the opponent with 42% of their modified attack rating, which means that you're getting an effective 58% reduction. That's still really, really good, right? That is more than doubling your effective health. But I do want to clarify that it's not a 75% reduction. It's not quadrupling your effective health. So you inflict a taunt debuff each time the opponent fails to activate a buff or debuff during a basic attack with a cooldown of 4 seconds. This is probably not going to come up a whole lot on offense, it's mostly a defensive annoyance, but you can inflict a taunt debuff by landing a heavy attack and build them that way. Next up, your bleed debuffs. All attacks inflict a bleed debuff, but there's a cooldown of the length of the bleed debuff. Now, Deep Wounds does allow these to stack up to 2 at a time by increasing that 4 seconds, but if you don't have Deep Wounds, then this cooldown will end just as the previous bleed finishes. Opponents that purify, cleanse, or specifically use an LMD to remove these bleed debuffs are instead inflicted with a Spleed debuff. Basically the same, except they're passive, deal more damage, and have a dumber name. This is accurate. No haze from you, Deadpool. It is dumb. If the opponent is suffering from a Daunted effect, which you'll see later, then all Duodenum bleeds instead inflict an instant Spleed debuff, dealing this burst of damage. And so that means that you don't have to have them purified or cleansed to get those immunity bypassing silly bursts if that Daunted is up. So the fourth light attack, we mentioned this, disables Deadpool's Special 3 for half a second, allowing you to build to 3 bars and go Special 2, Special 1. The heavy attack, this part is still there while walking forward, skipping forward, as opposed to actually dashing forward or backwards. You have to allow that auto run to kick in. Or while landing light attacks 1 or 3, Deadpool builds up slap charges up to 10, while at max slap charges, using a heavy attack inflicts 15 of those bleeds, which again, if the opponent has Daunted up, are going to be Spleed debuff bursts. Special 1, during this attack, Duodenum Poke does not have a cooldown, meaning each of the hits is going to apply a bleed. And then if you're at 10 slap charges, then you get the super slap from the final hit of this, inflicting an additional 20. Yay! Or 25 against skill champions, which is going to give you access to 35 or 40 bleeds or Spleed debuffs if you have the Daunted up. And that is where your cash out comes from, right? Because the Special 2's point is to apply that Daunted. Moving on to there, the defender is more likely to use this, and it is annoying. But each hit that is blocked inflicts a taunt debuff. Again, mostly a defender annoyance. You're not really going to use it on offense. If Deadpool lands all of the hits in this attack, he inflicts a stun passive for 2 seconds, which is long enough for you to run up and heavy. It is also long enough for you to run up medium and then immediately throw a Special 1, which you have ready because you built to 3 bars and disabled your Special 3 before throwing this. And then the first hit inflicts a Daunted passive for 15 seconds. And then the first hit inflicts a Daunted passive for 15 seconds, pause during special attacks. So this Daunted is going to magnify all of the damage the opponent takes during specials, right? And that includes Spleed debuff bursts. This 15 seconds gives you time to get to a Special 1 and probably another Special 1 after that, but you're going to have trouble doing too much beyond that. And like I said earlier, if your opponent has something that blocks you off from that passive stun, and then they just manage to stall for long enough for this to go away before you get to the Special 1, then you are kind of out of luck. That is basically where the loop falls apart, but 15 seconds is probably enough. And then Special 3, this inflicts a taunt debuff, and grants a 60% vicious debuff for 25 seconds. While this vicious is active, taunt debuffs on the opponent are paused. So you can be tankier while this is up, basically, right? Because you're going to have more taunts. The tempo of your fight's probably going to be better because the opponent's going to be throwing more specials. But it is important to note that vicious only benefits debuffs. So this is only going to help your standard Duodenum Poke bleeds. This is not going to do anything to the Spleed debuffs. So, signature ability, each time the opponent purifies a taunt debuff, or a taunt debuff on the opponent is replaced due to them hitting the stack limit, right? So when you're at 3 and you apply a new taunt, it replaces the oldest one. That also counts. Deadpool gains a power efficiency buff, reducing the cost of special attacks by 20% until the next special is used. This has a cooldown, and also has a max stacks of 2. So you can make that special 2 thrown at 3 bars of power 40% cheaper, meaning you have a full bar and then some ready to go, and it makes it that much easier to throw 2 special ones before the Daunted expires. Additionally, against skill champions, the first 5 Spleed debuffs reduce the opponent's regen rate by up to 20%. So at max sig, this fully turns off regen by reducing regen rate by 100%. And yeah, this is aimed at Nick Fury. This won't work on all skill champions because some of them lock their own regen rates and just ignore this. But against Nick, this is very effective. And then again, I'm not really going to go over the synergies because most of them are just updating references to bleed to account for debuffs. And again, that's Deadpool. That's kind of the whole thing. He's definitely a Battlegrounds nuke. I think you guys will enjoy him. People keep saying we want a good Deadpool in the game. The regen on the classic version has been problematic. We've talked about that before. We don't have to sidetrack that here. But here you go. This is definitely a good version of Deadpool in the game. Hope y'all enjoy him. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.